Hello to you. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and this is Poland Daily Culture. We are discovering the secrets of Tamara Łempicka in this episode. With me in the studio is Grzegorz Musiał, the author of a book about her.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you very much for sharing also the experience which you gained while working on this topic, because it's in many aspects is a mystery, and it was needed to be a very rich experience. And when we look at Tamara's paintings, they are futuristic. They're full of colors. They're full of energy. They usually show vehicles and women, but they're also very expressive. But what we know about Tamara is the fact that she was very hardworking, and we know that, like, we see the details, and that they are very. In many ways, her paintings are very traditional. In other ways, they're futuristic. So my question is, how did he work, and where did he learn painting?
She started very early as a girl, because she was brought up in an upper-class family. First, she was born in Warsaw, but then very quickly they moved to Russia, where her family had the business, because her grandfather was the representative of Credit Lyonnais Bank in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, sorry. So they moved to Moscow, where they joined the big colony of Polish middle and upper middle class people who lived there, because it was a big capital, Moscow, back then, and many Poles would go there, for the business reasons or to make careers, whatever. There was enormous market, Russia, in the Tsarist times, so it was area for making great financial, success. So her family joined them, and then she was as a little girl, she was brought to the exhibitions, to the galleries, to the theater performances, because let's remember that Moscow back then, in the beginning of the 20th century, was the huge capital full of very progressive art. Masters like Kandinsky, like Stanislavski in theater, Meyerhold, and all those guys who really created, the large part of the 20th century art in the world. And this was Moscow, and she was there. And the family was aware of the importance of art in life, because, upper class people, the part of the bringing up children is contact with the arts at the highest level. So she learned from the early years that, the art and the highest art is so important in life. Also, they would go, like most of people of their class in Europe would go for the summer season to south of Europe, right? Italy, mostly of south of France or south of Italy, Milan, to Venice, and then she would go there with her grandmother, her beloved grandmother, Clementina, who was also very, very good in the arts, and she took care on her for the proper bringing up in the artistical sense. She would bring her to Brera in Milan, or to Villa Borghese in Rome, whatever, and taught her, this painting, is by Caravaggio, and look at the first plan, look at the second plan, and compare these two plans, just see how important was this knife laying on the table here, and the reflection of the light on this knife goes straight into the window. So she just got such lessons from early years. Attitude to work, full of respect. Because the part of success in her sphere, she was not aristocratic, she was bourgeois. Hard work was a part of being the part of the sphere, to work hardly, not to use money the others earn for you, maybe later, but beginning is your own hard work. And she took it like the breath in her lungs, And
so she was working. Where was she learning? Because, yeah. I would say the role of an artist, or the career of an artist, is very unstable. So how did she persuade also her parents to invest in her and to give her? Well,
the investments came later, because what you're talking about now was her early years. Because she was sent to the schools, of course the best schools again, in Switzerland. So she had a contact with the arts again. Zurich in the beginning of the century was the center of Cabaret Voltaire, of the Dada movement. So she had the contact with the swallows of the first signs of the new coming into Europe. So she was really lucky to have been in contact with the living art from the early years of her life. But the schools came later. The schools came to her when she was in Paris. after the revolution. When she emigrated as a poor woman, she lived in the cheap hotel and they have no money for living sometimes. So she got help from Yusupov again, from the Prince Yusupov, who was her friend. And before she started earning her own money, and she went to best schools in Paris, L'Académie de la Grand Chaumière. It was this most important school of painting, and Académie Ranson, where such painters like Maurice Denis taught young painters, or André Lotte. And she found in André Lotte, she found really her tutor, because he was fascinated with Cubism, which was already in fashion in Paris, beginning of the 20s. But he was also very strongly connected with his feelings, artistical feelings were devoted to old masters of Renaissance. And he was looking for someone to invest his ideas into, who would follow this idea.
And she became the pupil. Okay.
And she came with this, ambiguity in herself, like the love for the past, for the old masters, and the need to make the revolution. And to me, that we talk about those two personalities in her.
And we see this in her paintings.
Yeah,
because sometimes her figures, I would say, they are even Renaissance element of the
She was able to put in agreement two elements, two epochs in art, which apparently do not agree at all, like Cubism and the Renaissance. Oh my God! It's
and that's
only
in her paintings, yes.
And she put it into the one perfectly harmonized vision of a body, of a person, very strongly surrendering to the geometrical tyranny, like those rounds and triangles and whatever, but having preserved all the beauty of the abundance of the Renaissance portrait.
Exactly. So it is full of energies, those portraits, definitely. Very expressive.
Because the tension comes between those two elements, Cubism and Renaissance.
But also
they
they're
fight.
Human figures still. Yes. And it's not only triangles and rounds. So we see the human figures, we see women, we see men, we can recognize them. Sometimes there are portraits as well of people who we can name who they were.
Love for the detail, which was taught as a child in the museums of Italy and France, like the scene with this knife laying on the front table and reflecting the light to the window. The power of the detail. So she could use it in her own painting. Look what happens on the portrait of Mrs. Alain Bolt, a billionaire in America. She portrayed. She's sitting on a chair with her green shoes on the front, on the lower front. Then the hand is by her, hanging down with a bracelet, and her eyes looking straight to the painter. And there are three green stains there. The tip of her shoes is emerald green, the emeralds on her wrist, and the emerald eyes. It's a triangle, And this is the composition, the power of composition. Every painting of hers contains a very well-designed composition, and that makes the object of art. That's why it's so powerful, because it's perfectly composed. And it's not only the vision, but composition of the vision.
Yes, I understand. And there's a moment in the book where she criticized modern art. I don't know if you put it yourself there, or you know that what was her approach to modern art. But modern art with losing the element of beauty and the searching of beauty is a complete something opposite totally to, I would say, the whole of her life.
The basis of her thinking about the art was one word: beauty. The art has to speak to the viewer with the language of a beauty, and that's all. If there's a beauty that can be said in many ways, but it has to be beautiful, just beautiful. And when she comes to the Biennale in Venice in 1960, I think, 8, and she sees the famous glass jar given the first prize back then, 1968, with the human feces inside.
Yeah, it needed
Tamara,
to be.
who painted those portraits with those emeralds and everything, and she suddenly stands in front of the little paprika, dried brown paprika inside the jar as the first prize. She can only utter, with this constricted throat.
Like, why?
The art is ended. truly I'm saying to you that the art is ended. And she spoke it to her companion, lady companion, who was with her. And he went out just with tears falling down her face. Of course, cigarette immediately, sat down on the bench and
the art has ended.
Was silent for some time.
Well, after visiting recently Villa Borghese, I had an element that the art, historical art, and back then is really like it's gobsmacking you. It's taking yourself somewhere absolutely different, in a different place than modern art does. And so I kind of share the Tamara's approach when it comes to...
Yeah, well, I just recently heard a story a couple of years ago from my friend who was in academy. I will not mention the place in Poland, but the very well-known academy of fine arts, where the lessons of anatomy, drawing, hands and muscles, other things, they were just like 2 hours per week. They used to be. And now they cancelled it all. So they are not taught the drawing anatomy. So he said, how they want to be painters in life if they are not taught human hand?
That's
when
absolutely
it's laying
ridiculous.
on the table or grasping something. This is the basis. The Renaissance masters knew it, like, Leonardo or Michelangelo, they spent the nights because the days, it was forbidden to make the anatomy, experiments, but they would go at night, they paid the attendants, to stay in the anatomy centers at the dawn, just making themselves, the autopsies. And that's how they learned this perfect play of the muscles in the human body and other things. And she knew it too.
Of course, and she was a traditionalist when it comes
Absolutely.
to this. And if you go to a modern art gallery and you feel this element of emptiness and the fact that it doesn't fulfill your need of art, you can bravely say that the same experience had Tamara Łempicka, one of the greatest artists of 20th century. So this kind of brings another perspective to our approach to art. Thank you very much for watching Poland Daily Culture.